about this yesterday, but remember, you have 7 documents. Everyone take out your documents. You have 7 documents. You have to use 4 of them. So you have to paraphrase them, show that you know what's in the document, and then use them as evidence for your thesis statement. And remember your thesis statement, that is the subtopics, the A and the B, because it's a 4-paragraph essay. And that will be in your topic sentence for the body paragraph, and make sure it supports and prove it, relate it back to it. Show it meets your claim that you agree with the statement or disagree with the statement. And so, this is something I basically showed you this before. I even had it on the board for the last one. But don't forget, in the topic sentence, you have to explain what the topic is, and your topic's the A and the B from your thesis statement. Paragraph essay, 2 body paragraphs. First document, support the thesis or claim. First document, and then, oh, I told you about how you have to sign it 2 times, right? Did I say in the beginning, you have to put down who wrote it? Who wrote it or what the document is? You're from the Covenant of the League of Nations, or as William Borah in his speech to Congress. And then at the end, you must put down doc 1, doc 2, whatever the document is. I said that to you yesterday, didn't I? Don't forget to do that. It really helps grading. You have to make it easy for the person grading it. Especially, don't think so much about me, even though I think, you didn't want to think that, but in the exam, they don't know who you are. You just be an essay. They grade. So make it easy for them. So back to this. And then you need the why statement for 2 of your 4 documents. For 2 of the 4. And that is, further analysis. And the half, which means basically you put down like William Borah. Isn't that the first document? Yeah, William Borah believes this because of, and some kind of historical event. Yeah, who he's talking to, his point of view, or its purpose, where he's coming from, or the purpose. Where you're basically explaining why they wrote them, what their motivation was. William Borah is a conservative. He's an isolationist. I just told you what William Borah was. Yeah. So it's going to take that. No, that's the economic treaties. The League of Nations is in the Treaty of Versailles. And so it says the Covenant of the League of Nations that was in the Treaty of Versailles. Second document, I'll explain this in just 1 second. You need an example of outside information, so something you know outside the documents. And remember, we talked about context a little bit yesterday again. What's great context if you're going to write an essay about the ratification of the Treaty of Versailles? What is great context if you're talking about, World War I and what else? If it's about the ratification of the Treaty of Versailles, the Treaty of Versailles. So mention about World War I, who won it, and then what's in the treaty. A few things in the treaty. That's your outside information. That's stuff that you know, background to the topic of the question. Yes. Say it again. You can mention the 14 points. That's a good example of outside information. Now, you don't want too much on it. You need about 3 of those things. But read and Wilson probably writing the 14 points. Didn't leave those all together. Something like that. And then, last sentence, some kind of further analysis, explain how it proves your thesis. Do that twice. Opening paragraph. Some kind of introduction, context, thesis, and we know that. 3 to 4 sentences, context. And then last paragraph, the least important paragraph in a timed essay. Doesn't mean skip it, but if there's one you're going to skip on, it's this paragraph. Kind of show you your thesis, and then broad context. What did it lead to? The U.S. became isolationist, not involved in foreign conflicts. Are you guys going to be quiet? And so, more big picture stuff. And One more thing. So on the AP exam, you're gonna have a little bit more time. We're doing a 4-paragraph, 2 body, 4 documents, 2 why statements for me tomorrow. You'll have more time. Now, if you do that, get a good thesis, context. Well, let me show you this real quick. I jumped the gun. Here's the rubric again for the AP exam. Good thesis, good why, that's claim, 1 point. Context, 1 point. Describe 3 documents, or use 3, get 1 point. Use 4, get another point. If you have this, and this, I'm going to pass the partner the shape questions. And let's be practical. That's first thing we want, all right? Okay. When we're doing the AP exam, pass. And then when we have more time to think about it, let's get to the next step. If you can get 2 why statements, no problem. Historical evidence. If you show those 2 examples about that information, you get that one, boom. And now you're looking at really solid. It's a 30-year school. We're just being practical. Still have to do a good essay, still got the information down. But we start, I figure out how to help you out with the test. Now, for whatever reason, they call this complex understanding, but they demand either. They started this about 2 years ago, and I already gave you this. It's on the sheet I gave you about outline and DBQ, and I will post this up again. You already have this. I'll just review. It's not on the DBQ I gave you. It's on the outline right at DBQ I gave you before the first one. I gave you this before the first DBQ. So let's back to this. Either use all 7 documents, so basically another paragraph. And a 5-paragraph, you can 5-paragraph essay is perfectly fine. 4-paragraph essay, as long as you have to stop in, it's perfectly fine. Or show, I should have put why statement, show why statement or have for 4 documents. I think that's easier. Because almost always you'll get a document that you're going to roll. Let's see out. So when you do the AP exam, let's be practical. We want to get this, and this, you're in great shape. This, you're in great shape, and you want to get that one last point, you're thinking, I'm going to get a 5 on me. What my recommendation will be for you, try to use 5 documents to try to get a why statement. If you're, I'm going to get that 7. But even if you don't get this last point, you can still get a 5 on the AP exam. So if you do what I told you to do in class right here, you can still get 6 on 7. But by doing 1 additional, you're hedging your bets. Just in case one thing. Sound good? But you have more time. DBQs are great. They give you documents, they help you out. The questions are broad enough, read or whatever direction you want to go. You write what you know. You pick what the body paragraphs are. You pick. I know it's more. I know you got to be problems. Whatever, right? You got to do work. Big deal. You write well. I know you can do this. Great. We want to write multiple choice. It's yes or no, right or wrong. If you write down your thesis statement on Teams, I'll try to check it around 8:30, 9 o'clock tonight. I'll get the feedback, correct? Lastly, are there any questions on the documents? Yeah.
That cartoon that it's supposed to be legal or should see talking about the like the Senate using the Constitution so that it's stupid. So
Let's come back to that. Because I'll show you exactly what that is. Okay. So I will come back to document 4.
and document 7.
Document 7, who wrote it? What was Henry Cabot? Now, if I say claims of reservations, and if you read document 7, it's talking about, okay, so do we want before let's go to war for France, right? Does he basically say that in document 7? Are we going to be forced to go to war? He liked part of the treaty, but he didn't want this idea of collective security forcing the United States to go to war. Henry Cabot Lodge was a conservationist. So he was fairly liberal. He was fairly liberal. But he believed in some reservations on Article 10. Any other documents? I will talk about document 4 in just a second. And so, liberal wants more foreign policy, League of Nations, conservative wants less. Reservationists were fairly liberal, but kind of conservative. So let's get into this. Is this right where we quit? So let's get to the three groups. The first one is loyal Democrats. And they are Democrats committed to the president's treaty. And Wilson decided, once he got home, that despite all the problems with the treaty, it was the best treaty we're ever going to get. It is the treaty that guarantees peace and therefore it cannot be changed. And so they are going to say no changes to the treaty. Absolutely none. Absolutely no changes. He also made the statement, which is partially true. We made this agreement with foreign countries. How can we change and go back to them? Trust me, we could have went back to them. So he's a little bit disingenuous then. But no changes. So these are the loyal Democrats. They are basically committed to Wilson's position. And then we have reservations. They are mostly Republicans, even though there's a few Democrats. And they're fairly liberal. They want the treaty in some way. They want it, but they hate Article 10. I'm still using the Roman numeral, but I make sure it's Article 10 in there so you don't think it's Article X. But they want changes. The leader of the reservationists was the guy that Wilson did not invite. Remember, he invited no Republicans, Henry Cabot Lodge. So here is Lodge trying to get the treaty that is all battered and beaten going through a committee with changes. They want to strengthen Article 10, or sorry, weaken Article 10, so it strengthens constitutional guarantees. They want language in there that says the United States won't be forced into World War I, forced into war. And then the last group, irreconcilables. They were conservative completely. They're isolationists, totally opposed to the treaty. Mostly Republicans, but there were a lot of Democratic irreconcilables. And I want to be clear, no treaty, changes. Stuck with Wilson. Woodrow Wilson got back, and don't forget, he had the flu. He was different, noticeably different, probably my and more irrational. Now, he always believed that he was right. He had this feeling that I am right and everybody is wrong. If you disagree with me, you're totally wrong. But it's even more pronounced. And he looked at these senators, and decided, I have to influence them to change their vote. Not, I'll make minor changes to the treaty to get you to vote. I'm going to make you reverse your position. And so he campaigned around the country. He went to the states where reservationists were, areas in California, to get the voting population to complain to their senator to get them to change their vote. And I should add, senators hate that. If the president comes to their state and attacks them in their state, they're wrong and the senator must change. Senators get very parochial, insular. How dare you say that in my state? And so that actually entrenched them more. It showed Wilson's lack of political knowledge. He didn't understand the way senators really feel like they're kind of like little fiefdoms in their state. And then in Colorado, he had a massive stroke that incapacitated him. We, to this day, don't know how bad it was. It appears as though for nearly 9 months he could not talk. He could not communicate. The stroke left him speechless. Now, he had just recently remarried. His first wife had passed away, and she was 25 years younger than him. became the gatekeeper. And everybody who wanted to talk to Wilson had to come through her. And she said only I could communicate with him. And so the president was basically locked in a room and nobody could talk to him except for his wife and a tiny little group of people. Now, technically, this can't happen today, but back then it was not clear constitutionally, what do you do if the president is incapacitated? The 25th Amendment has since been ratified in 1968. And it says that if the president is incapacitated, the vice president must take over. So for example, if the president, let's say he's getting surgery and is going to be out, during that time, the vice president will take over. That's happened a number of times. Or if the president, the vice president is.
Hey guys, move out of the way.
Sorry, no, it's up. Shoot. Okay, moving back. The 25th Amendment, if also the president is, let's say, unable to carry out the job for some reason. Technically, they're supposed to say it. Actually, the cabinet members can vote to decide whether or not the president is incapacitated. Say the president. So mention, something like that. But it's still very difficult to do. It didn't exist there. So you just imagine the situation. No one talks to the president. And why this is important is this. The president is saying no compromise, no compromise. You can't change your vote. No compromise, no reservations to the Constitution. And then boom, stroke, no recognition. And his wife kept him on the exact spot where he had the stroke. So there's no compromise once he had the stroke. Yeah, right. And what's that last part? Like it's shown. Wilson didn't want any reservation. He didn't want any reservations at all. He wanted the treaty as written. For reservationists wanted a few words in there to make Article 10 less strong. So it got to the vote. There's going to be 3 votes. Wilson, out of communication. And I can't emphasize this enough. No compromise, no compromise, no reservation. Boom, gone. No more talking Wilson. And that became the position. So who knows? First one, there were reservations. There were some limits to Article 10 saying the United States must declare war before it commits. Remember, the word is collective security. The whole thing about it was collective security. Did everyone hear me say that? Collective security. Article 10 is collective security. Irreconcilables and loyal Democrats voted against, did not pass. Then the vote with no reservations, no change to the treaty. Irreconcilables and reservation voted against it, did not pass. Remember, they need 2/3. The last one, there was a massive lobbying effort and begging Wilson to allow his loyal followers to change their vote. But through his wife, the vote with reservations, Wilson wouldn't release. Who knows what he really thought? He never really would say it afterwards when he could talk. It was close. It actually got a majority of voters, but not to 2/3. Why? All irreconcilables and most loyal Democrats voted against. And that's why the treaty was not ratified. And it's one of those. And basically that question is saying, was it the conservative reconcilables or more conservative, slightly conservative reservations? Was it their fault for demanding a change, the reservationists? They're more conservative? Or was it the more liberal, loyal Democrats? Was it their fault for not changing? Or was it Wilson? If Wilson would have committed to any kind of reservation, it would have passed. It was just a few votes. Just a few votes. And who knows how things would have been different. But now, the isolationists are in power because it did not get ratified. So the US would not join the League of Nations. Now, the US would still be involved in international affairs. The United States would make deals on naval power, would make treaty, the beginnings of agreements on treaties. But in the 1930s, when a series of events happened, like for example, when Japan took Manchuria, China was in the middle of the Civil War, Manchuria was kind of quasi-independent, Japan took it. League of Nations could do nothing to stop a progression. Same thing with Japan attack or Italy attacked Ethiopia. League of Nations could do nothing, and the US was out. The US basically nothing to do with it. Japan attacked China, US out. Germany threatened Czechoslovakia, out. Now, would the United States have been able to change what happened in World War II? But we don't know. It did not happen. There was no chance. Now, the US had a very small military. They demobilized the entire army. But economically, the US came out of World War I stronger than anybody else in the world. It's the linchpin of this League of Nations agreement with the other leading powers. Or, I'm sorry, the keystone. No keystone. Here is a pro-isolation that's saying we dodged a bullet using Titanic, which sunk in 1912, reference, avoiding the icebergs that form treaties, etc. So the United States would not be part of the world, at least fully. The League of Nations would be weak when it was most needed to stop war. That's kind of what we call the outcome of not ratifying it. When you come into class tomorrow, you can have your brainstorm list of 15 facts, which also give you context, this background material. You have to write down, again, thesis and your outline. You can have your outline all planned. But I would have it planned. But I want you to go through the process and be very, 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 very concise on your outline. You know what I mean by that? You put down the base, 1 or 2 words. Make sure you put down which document you use in each paragraph. Never got that? Brainstorm. You have to do the outline, bring paper, and I know I'll probably regret this. You can use line. See? Aren't I nice? Pen, black or blue pen, or red, white. Or pencil. Okay. So, right after the war, part of what hit was a post-war depression, a pretty nasty post-war depression. First off, you have 3 million men in uniform, and the United States demobilized the entire army. They demobilized it. All of a sudden, you have all these men coming home. Do they have jobs? No. In this new post-war world, all these factories are shutting their doors. You have these 2 million men coming home, and then eventually another million when they slowly demobilize the rest. No jobs, no prospects, angry, different, change. There was a feeling, what the heck are we fighting this for? Next, all the factories that finally started producing munitions had to retool their entire factories to consumer goods. And you can't just simply go from Model T, then overnight go to making Model T Fords, go overnight to carriages for artillery. They go overnight back to Model T. It takes months to retool a factory. It takes months today. It's very difficult to change production. And so you have this situation where we have all these factories, and economically the US is potentially stronger, but in the short run, they're not making consumer goods. And you have all these men who are unemployed, who are former soldiers, and the factory workers. If you're not making Model T Fords, you don't need as much steel. So in the short run, you're going to have unemployment. And don't forget, what was happening to prices during the war? Dramatically. Wages were not keeping up. And so you have workers who could not afford basic necessities. And going to 1919, in fact, the war is over. we've made our sacrifices. People are being unemployed and prices are high. It was a nightmare. We have a term for this from the 1970s called stagflation. We will come back to this. And with the during the war retrenchment and fear of enemies, and then this depression, it would trigger a conservative wave, economically, but also socially, which we'll get to in just a second. And we have our own problems here. And it didn't come out there, but not overseas, not international. That's got covered up by something. Not overseas. We have our own problems. We should care about this. And that's going to trigger a conservative wave, not only isolationists, but also conservative economics and conservative in attitude, which we'll get to. And this is the gross national product, a crude measurement of the size of the economy. It's imperfect, but we still use it today. And you can see this is the big crash. And the economy really the depression really did not end until 1922. And they did fairly well, and then Great Depression. That's just the beginning. 20s was not the boom time as much of a boom. Well, nationwide, this is going to trigger a series of struggles. For workers who had accepted the sacrifice during the war, now demanded wages to keep up. And you're going to get strikes in police officers. The first really big ones will be police officers in Boston, and then longshoremen. This is the 50,000 walking out here. Longshoremen, which are dock workers. They unload ships in Seattle. And it soon spread nationwide. And then West Virginia coal miners. Difficult, awful job, which still has a significant amount of child labor. These are workers in a mine. These are kids. This is about 1913. So it's right before the war, but it's the same technique used. Mining back then was very labor intensive. And over 100 miners on average were dying every month in the coal mines in West Virginia. That's how dangerous it was. Brutal life. And think about the future you have, especially if you're injured down there. There's no workers' comp at that time. They went on strike. It's going to be called the West Virginia Coalfield. One of those brutal attacks where police and Pinkerton guards killed miners was called the Matewan Massacre. But without the coal and the post-war economic disaster, President Wilson, somehow through him, he was just coming out of the stroke, they sent in the troops. National Guard, and they brutally put down this. These are nationwide. There are strikes in Butte and Anaconda. So this nationwide. Coal mining, there's almost no miners anymore. It's all miners. Very few miners. Even in places like West Virginia, or heck, almost no. There's less than 100 people working in actual mines and coal stream. It's all mechanized. But back to this. At the same time, worldwide, there is a wave of anarchist attacks. This is the last big anarchist terrorist wave. The last one in world history would be right here, 1919, 1920. Over 50 attacks, including a mail bomb at the Attorney General's house of the United States. At the Attorney General's house, nearly killing the Attorney General. The biggest of these bombings, I don't know why, it's supposed to be 38 killed, or somebody said put it down here, was at Wall Street, where a street vendor's cart was actually mined and exploded, killing 38 people outside of this US stock exchange and wounding over 120. Ironically, this attack, which just freaked everybody out, would be the last one. I mean, they just literally fell off there. It was like the last wave of anarchists. Remember, anarchists are socialists. And this really freaked out Attorney General Palmer and Wilson.
And don't forget, we just had total war. Can't just shut off the attitude of looking for potential enemies, not just Germans, but remember the targets were socialists. And here's the thing, were these strikes and bombings, were they fighting for workers' rights, better conditions, better rights for all people? Or was this the beginning of the revolution that they feared during World War I? Remember, they freaked out because of the Bolshevik Revolution. War madness took hold. Remember, Frank Little gave a speech for the international workers of the world, and he was lynched. What town was he lynched? Do you remember? Butte. He was lynched in Butte, America, which is a kind of where I'm mentioning St. Patrick's Day, which once again, some of you are not wearing green. You know who you are. We like the Irish. We have great respect for the Irish people. You know, when I say we, it's the royal. So, and here are cartoons. First off, this one's kind of shocking. Now, you can agree or disagree with the demands of the coal miners, but they went through conditions that we can't even comprehend. And here they are, just like they were crying babies. Here's Uncle Sam spanking them. That's anti-union. Here, Bolshevism turning back the clock of civilization. Well, you can imagine which direction Palmer, who was nearly killed with a mail bomb, or Wilson went. Oh, don't forget the thinking of total war. They still hadn't got out of this. The revolution might be happening now. Oh, sure, the war on the battlefield's over, but there's still enemies within we haven't dealt with. There will be a second Red Scare right after World War II for almost the exact same reasons. It'll be a few years later, but the same kind of causes. And socialists were opposed to the war. They became enemies during World War I. They must still be the enemies. And this will trigger the first Red Scare. It will also be called the Palmer Raids. But actually, there weren't very many anarchists. There weren't very many socialists. So they went after labor unions. And the international workers of the world, the Wobblies, who I mentioned before from Butte, were destroyed. In fact, their leadership were arrested, no charges, arrested and exiled. Big Bill Haywood, the leader of the international workers of the world, was sent to the Soviet Union. Actually, it was called the Soviet Union. So they just exiled American citizens to kick them out of the country because it is under once a year. That was 1920, 1921. And so when President Trump talks about doing that today, there is precedent. We could disagree with the precedent or agree, but it has happened before in American history. People that we don't like their position or their way they look. And here's Bolshevism being attacked by American institutions. So beating them with a shovel. We will see this cartoon when I show you the whole cartoon. This is from a cartoon. And the company that made it has a way to attack labor unions. Same thing. Do you know anything about the IWW kicking Reds out of the town? What happened to labor unions in the 1920s? Get this last part. This would trigger a huge drop in labor unions, which are already small. Massive drop. And labor unions, fewer labor unions, wages stagnate or drop. The nature of unions. Tied to this, I have to give a little background. Now, this happened during the war. It's called the Great Migration. And hundreds of thousands every year beginning in 1913 of mostly African Americans left the South, left or ran away or kicked out of their sharecropping farms and went to northern cities. Why? Jobs. The economy began to boom after beginning of World War I. And then when the US actually entered the war, more jobs. Now, they mostly went to big cities. For example, you have this huge wave of immigrants from the South going to Detroit. Why? Ford and General Motors. Chicago, New York City, but almost always big city. And that's Chicago right there. But this was the most racist time in American history. And this reaction to people coming in, internal migration, is going to trigger a wave of racism that will be very closely tied to nativism. And nativism was very closely tied to the Red Scare. Remember I told you they kicked them out of the country? These foreign instigators. Why did they only go to big cities? Do you remember the name of those towns? Small, medium-sized towns that would not allow anybody in town that was not white. Sundown towns. There was a massive wave of sundown towns that were started in the teens and the 1920s. Why? Because of the Great Migration. So it might have been people, or these were people who, regardless of their prejudice or bigotry, they did not become truly, or then be known until black people started moving into white neighborhoods. And so here, this agent is actually being arrested for trying to get black people for entering a neighborhood. And to help people coming in from the South, they'll help you out. It's called the Urban League, to try to help blacks who are coming south or coming from the South. And remember, the KKK had started again. And the KKK, okay, the original Ku Klux Klan was to stop freedmen from voting and taking advantage of their rights. This one, the KKK saw themselves as the leaders of being true Americans. They were anti-immigrant, anti-Jewish, intensely anti-Jewish, intensely anti-Catholic, and of course, I put down anti-black, but it was anybody of darker colored skin. Let's be clear about it. And they saw themselves as true Protestant Christianity. And that was why they attacked Catholicism. Here is a Ku Klux Klan cartoon from Indiana in 1922. And see the Klansmen knocking out the Pope, literally taking out the Pope, holding the Bible. And don't forget, remember that movie, Birth of the Nation? The first real movie, the Ku Klux Klan was the hero. It was about Reconstruction, kind of invented movies, masterpiece of movie, but also the definition of the lost cause, definition of Jim Crow, promoting Jim Crow laws. That triggered the Klan in 1913, and then you have the Great Migration, and then you have World War I. All that tied together would be to an explosion of the Klan, where the Klan is going to take over one state and nearly take over another. Get to that in a second. It's so big that they're going to have a rally of thousands in front of Washington, D.C. in 1922, in front of the Capitol. So, what will this trigger? It is tied to the Red Scare. It's very much the same kind of people who were involved in the Red Scare are going to be involved in this. It's 1919 through 1921. Oh, forgot. I know you've been waiting for this picture, but now you get to see Klansmen on a Ferris wheel. You can now check that off your bingo card. I've now seen Klansmen on a Ferris wheel. I'm hoping for the storm, but that's just me. Red Summer. And these are going to be called race riots, but it is basically whites attacking blacks, these recent migrants into northern cities. Over 60 cities. Washington, D.C. would be one of the biggest, and it would explode in 1919. But it happened also in other cities with huge amounts of migration. Detroit, Newark, Chicago was big. Omaha was one of the most violent. And Omaha then was about 250,000 people. Now it's about 500,000. But we just don't think of Omaha. And these are recent migrants being kicked out of their home, being attacked in Chicago right there. And they call them race riots. But they were all gangs of people who just were white, who were attacking people who were black because of their color of their skin. Now, I want to be very clear about this. These were whites attacking people who are black. They were not attacking them because they were white. They were attacking them because they had the ideology of racism. And they believed that one race was superior to the other. That's why they attacked. Not attack them because they're white.
It's actually because they were racist. And they were dividing people by race. It doesn't mean that we have to divide people by race. And dividing people by race is an obstruction of society. They decided to do that. I'm very clear about that. Because there were many white people who were appalled by this. So this was how racism just affected certain people. And so here, this National Guardsman in New York City, churches being burned. That is a lynching of a man in Omaha. And this was put out in newspapers in white majority neighborhoods where Negroes were planning to kill all whites in Chicago. Not true. They put that out there to terrify people, to get them riled up. Red Summer, over 500 people would be killed, mostly African Americans. It would culminate in one of the most violent events in American history. It's going to be called the Tulsa Race Riots. And it's, even though it's 21, the majority of these had already been dying down, but this would be this horrible climax. So what happened was a black man was accused of raping a white woman, which was a really common theme of racist lynching. We're not clear if they had gone on a date or he simply just talked to her. That might be a destiny. Black man talking to a white woman. And we will get to Emmett. So it started there. They stormed the police just let them off, come in and they lynched. And that will trigger a massive riot where whites, including this is a Klan rally outside of Tulsa. Klan was huge in Oklahoma. Attacked the black segregated neighborhood. And they called it here Little Africa. But they had a relatively prosperous little business area called the Black Wall Street. And they burned it down. It was called Black Wall Street. And they burned it down. The National Guards came in, cordoned off the segregated neighborhood. And then they had a tiny little Air Force, not quite Air National Guard yet, but they had airplanes in the Air National Guard. And they bombed the black segregated area. 105 bombs. Over 120 people would be killed, over 500 would be wounded. They just found a mass grave, 40 people from this virus. Found right after COVID hit. Tulsa. Basically, a crackdown on those who are migrant. And I should add, in Oklahoma right now, you can get in serious trouble. You're a teacher and you teach about what happened in Tulsa. Serious trouble. So we are not in Oklahoma. So I told you what happened. But it was a combination. It's ties together. Now think about Red Summer and the fear of outsider. And that goes into an enemy within, people of different colors. Different religion, active. Yes. Yeah, they used to be really high, but now they're the lowest. Now, take that with a grain of salt. How did they get those scores? They're by standardized tests. And as we all know, standardized tests are, all of us have taken standardized tests, right? We all know the way they ask questions. And we also know some students take them very seriously and some students don't. So, but yeah, to that. But we have to also have those qualifiers. But yeah, Montana used to be really high. We're slipping, but we're still good. Helena's very good. Even here, even in this room, but it's all you. No coincidence. Racism, fear of outsiders, fear of radicals will lead to intense nativism. Intense nativism. And this had triggered before, we had talked about this, but it really hit after the war. These radical outsiders combined with fear of internal migrants. This is not a dumping ground, implying all the undesirables are coming from other countries. But you have to be clear about it. Most immigrants are coming to the United States. They had to leave. They were desperate and poor and had to make a really, really difficult, hard decision. It's scary leaving your country and going someplace else. And they had to show a great amount of courage and come to this scary place where they don't know anything and have to work so hard to make it. And then they're going to be called undesirables.
Yes, I have sympathy for it, but I too have relatives who were immigrants at one time for that reason. And so this idea of the melting pot of people coming in, but they're unassimilated, meaning they're not leaving their true culture, means something else. And Europe and Asia's teeming millions being poured in. But it ties directly to the Red Scare and Red Summer. And that's going to lead directly to the first ever blanket anti-immigration act in American history, the 1924 National Origins Act. And this would be the law of the land until 1965. And what did it do? It severely limited immigration by putting quotas directly by race. And only people of the Northwestern European race would be allowed in any large numbers. Why? Because they were considered white. And then those who were not quite white, they literally categorized. And it became a big debate. What is white and what is not? In fact, it was a 4-year debate that ended up in the Supreme Court where people from the brand new nation of Turkey, were they white? And so that told you everything you need to know about races. This is decided by people. Okay, and they eventually decided, yeah, kind of white. Which is fascinating to me. It's just really it, the whole thing. So, they dramatically cut back in Europe. And this tries to say that's a good thing. We're going to cut it off and funnel in only the desirables. And what were the desirables? White. Hey, does this tie in this idea that, okay, we got to preserve our race and not allow any race mixing. So we need selective breeding. Remember the term for that? Yeah, remember eugenics? Hey, what a good place to stop. So you can't have line paper, underline your thesis, brainstorm list you could have coming in and you can do your quick outline. But I expect you, I would plan that out, just write it out. Please have your documents. Yes, you can have your documents out. Have them marked up, scored, the ones you want to use. How many documents do you need? 4. And I'm telling you the truth. If you get 4 good documents, good why statements, context, and at least statement, you pass the TVQ and have a good chance to pass it. You get a couple more points on that, and you're in great shape. Step number 1. Right? Step number 1. You want to pass. You need facts and information. You need facts and information. Don't forget that. Show me you know stuff. I'll try to check 8:30, 9 o'clock. Sound good? I'll check Teams. If I miss it, I'll for sure do it in the morning. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Yeah. They're related. So red scare is mostly focused on like revolutionary soldiers. The red summer, it's for the color.
well,
That's
okay, so.
But they are different. But it's sort of the same. Because it was the same kind of fear of the same kind of fear.
No.
No. You have to write your outline in class, but you can have your outline plan. But you have to write it out in class, so you go through.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I want you to kind of go through the process of kind of doing
And
it.
it's so funny.
And you should be ready.
Yeah.
You just write down like what you're like, get the brainstorm list and stuff like that.
You can have that when you come in.
Oh.
Just.
What do you stop on? Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, for the 3rd term. Yeah, Jack, you showed me this now. That looks great. Yeah. Really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very good.
Yeah, we do. It's some chick that. Well, yeah, but she could be the woman's coach. No, she's both of them.
For pros,
But her dad, yeah, but her dad's off, or not her dad, her
Her husband.
husband is also coaching.
except he doesn't know how to, he doesn't know how to throw. He's literally.
I can.
Texas, so been teaching him with us, so that he can.
like, it's trying to like stop.
Make another five.
I hate.
So that's either reservation or. But it's conservative, but we don't, you know.
I love Yoakum, but
So,
he's never.
Is it liberal or
That's.
liberals? They want,
Yoakum was my.
Oh,
I don't want to play my.
liberals want diplomacy. And what's the big issue that conservatives don't want is League of Nations.
It's not the card.
It's really across the chain. I think it's, do you know?
It's constitutional. Congress, he's gonna make it.
Oh.
So they won't be forced into war because of
Beginners, like normal.
Good.
Yeah.
Makes guys grow through. It's like, are you,
Bear and Finn should be there.
it's so dumb. I'm so over it.
I just have no idea what varsity is with Derek. I don't know Oh, did you like her mix?
Mr. Partridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, why?
Who's that? Well, I think Elaine is in it. Oh. Elaine, are you part?
Where did I go? That's not.
Hey, don't let me forget, when we get to this cartoon to explain it, I will help you immensely on your DBQ. I blew through it, third period, then had to go back.
Dude, I thought it was pretty good. That was a pure chatting. I thought.